to Open Tech Convo. My name is Sergio Marlo Nicolas. Today we have Adrian McInman discussing the first of a three-part series on crisis management. This video focuses on what to do before a crisis, and subsequent videos will focus on what to do during and after a crisis. So let's get straight into it. Adrian, what is your best advice for leaders before a crisis?
Well, thank you very much indeed for having me back. I quite enjoyed the free videos that we did a couple of years ago. That was really fun. As for your question, my best advice for crisis management is to plan for crises ahead of time, control your emotions during a crisis, and then use a crisis aftermath checklist after crisis. But if we're only talking about what to do before a crisis, I would emphasize three things, which can be easily remembered by my acronym CPR, which stands for courageous, plan, and routines.
Great. Let's start with the first letter C of your acronym. What do you mean by courageous?
Well, let's go to the construction industry. Engineering journalist Howard Stutzman suggests that when you throw dozens of architects, engineers, subcontractors, and tradespeople all together on a construction site, a crisis is as certain as a sunrise. He believes that crises are very likely to happen because of complacency and slack attitudes of people in the construction industry. The solution, according to CEO Chris is very simple. He says leaders need to have more courage. And he gives many examples. I'll just give you a few. First, he suggests that leaders need to demand more time to inspect work sites. Second, he suggests that leaders should challenge any non-efficacious policy that basically is only there for public relations. And then third, he suggests that leaders need to focus on doing the right thing and not necessarily doing things cheaply and quickly.
Adrian, could you please elaborate?
Sure. It takes a lot of courage to go against the norm. It exposes you to ridicule and being ostracized. However, the benefits of being a courageous leader can be immense. For instance, let's go back to New Zealand. The statistics for the construction industry with regard to this are very frightening. Slightly more than 2 people on average per month die in that very developed country. And if that's not bad enough, slightly more than 1 person every day is seriously injured on a construction site. Let's now focus on another country, the United States, and a different aspect of construction, nail gun injuries. According to the CDC, 42,000 people end up in emergency departments in hospitals because of nail gun injuries every year. The cost of medical costs, rehabilitation and workers' compensation is a staggering $338 million a year. These numbers would be substantially reduced if leaders had more courage to take on the status quo and implement effective policies.
Let's move on to the second letter P of your acronym CPR. What do you mean by plan?
Leaders in some industries, such as air traffic control and emergency services, undergo substantial crisis management training. However, not all leaders go through such training and are not necessarily able to handle all the varied things that are associated with crises, such as handling financial attacks, reputation attacks, etc. But this can be partially rectified by planning. For instance, if they create a crisis management plan, they're more likely to know ahead of time what to do if a crisis happens. And in fact, by creating the crisis management plan, they're also more likely to prevent some crises from occurring. For instance, there was a 2022 article that talked about construction deaths in construction trenches in 2017. And there was somewhere close to about 47 deaths. And what they put in the report was that every single one of those deaths could have been prevented if they had planned better.
Planning is indeed important. Now please tell me about your final letter R of your acronym CPR. What do you mean by routines?
The R in CPR stands for consistently doing self-care routines. And it's very similar to the health and happiness research that shows that people perform better when they have great nests, which stands for nutrition, exercise, sleep, thinking, and social support. The idea of the R in CPR is that if you practice self-care every day, you're more likely to be able to handle a crisis. For instance, research shows that if you are low in anxiety and depression and high in happiness, you are more likely to be able to handle a crisis. Hand in hand with self-care is self-protection. Very important thing about being in a crisis is you must look after yourself first. And we all know this when we're on a plane. We're told put our oxygen mask on first before we help others, etc. For instance, you may have heard of the 12 miners in 2001 who went to rescue one miner, and unfortunately all of them died. Likewise, you may have heard of the mother and daughter who jumped into a confined methane pit to save their father/husband, who had also had somebody else jump in to try and save him as well. And unfortunately, all of them died. So you need to look after yourself, and you need to have a nice self-care routine.
Your CPR acronym seems pretty straightforward. I can see how it would be effective if implemented. Do you have any final thoughts on what to do before a crisis?
The CPR approach really is fairly simple and straightforward. Alas, most leaders don't adhere to all three components. However, if one or more of your audience today decide to now focus more on one or more of the three CPR components, then this video has been worthwhile doing. So with that in mind, you might like to get your audience to think about something Dale Carnegie suggests. He says that inaction breeds doubt and fear. Action breeds confidence and courage. So if you want to conquer fear, don't sit at home and think about it. Go out and get busy.